39 years old, backup tier journeyman, bouncing between leagues nobody watches, Moldova, Cyprus, Slovakia. Then, on June 15, 2026, this man walked onto a World Cup pitch for the first time in his life and stood between the goal and one of the most dangerous attacks on the planet. Spain, ranked number 2 in the world. Cape Verde, a nation of 500,000 people, ranked 67th. 90 minutes later, the scoreboard read 0-0. This is the story of Vozinha, the goalkeeper nobody outside his own country had heard of a week earlier, and how he became one of the most talked about men at the 2026 World Cup. His real name is Josimar José Évora Dias. Born June 3, 1986, in Mindelo on the island of São Vicente, Cape Verde. His parents actually wanted to name him Valdano, after the Argentine World Cup player Jorge Valdano. Cape Verdean authorities said no. So instead, they named him after a different player from that same 1986 World Cup, Josimar, a Brazilian fullback known for scoring screamers from impossible angles. But almost nobody calls him Josimar. He was raised by his grandparents, and it was them who gave him the nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life, Vozinha. In Cabo Verdeano, it roughly translates to little voice. He has 2 brothers, Delmiro, who also played professional football in Cyprus, and Clydeir, who took a completely different path and now teaches mathematics in Brazil. Here's what most highlight reels won't tell you. Vozinha's career did not begin at a World Cup. It began 19 years earlier at a local club called Batuque on his home island. From there, his career reads like a map of football's forgotten corners. Angola with Progresso do Sambizanga, 3 years. Moldova with Zimbru Chisinau. Portugal's second division with Gil Vicente, where he quietly saved 5 penalties in just 32 games. Cyprus with AEL Limassol, 5 years there alone. Slovakia with AS Trenčín. And finally, back to Portugal with Chaves, right up until 2026, just before this World Cup, when his contract ran out and, approaching his 40th birthday, he announced he was moving on. Nobody was writing articles about him. He wasn't trending, he was just working, showing up to training in leagues most fans couldn't name for over 200 professional matches that even official stat trackers haven't fully logged. And the entire time, there was one constant, the Cape Verde National Team. He made his debut for them back in September 2012. He'd already played at the Africa Cup of Nations 4 times in 2013, 2015, 2021 and 2023 without a single World Cup appearance to show for it. Rewind to 2021. Cape Verde is fighting for a spot at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. They go toe-to-toe with Nigeria, one of African football's real powerhouses, all the way to the final match day. It comes down to a single result in Lagos. Cape Verde needs something. They get a 1-1 draw. It's not enough. Qatar slips away. Vozinha was in that squad. So was the captain Ryan Mendes. So was defender Roberto Pico Lopez. They watched the dream die by the smallest possible margin. Most players in their 30s would have read that as the end of the road. Vozinha didn't retire. He didn't disappear. He kept playing. In Cyprus, in Slovakia, in Portugal, and kept showing up for his country, year after year, tournament after tournament. 4 years later, almost the exact same core of players, Mendes, Lopez, and Vozinha, would finally get it right.
To understand why this all matters, you need to understand Cape Verde itself. It's an archipelago off the west coast of Africa. Total land area, just over 4,000 square kilometers. Population, barely 500,000 people. They only became an independent nation in 1975, among the last in West Africa to do so. For decades, the national team operated with almost nothing. Patchy pitches, no real budget, a talent pool stretched across a massive diaspora scattered around the globe, in Portugal, in Cyprus, in the United States, in Turkey. Then, on October 13th, 2025, with a 3-0 win over Eswatini, Cape Verde did something no one had done in their history. They qualified for a World Cup. At the time, they were the smallest nation by land area and the second least populous ever to do it. When the team landed in Boston for the tournament, They didn't arrive to silence. They arrived to a 100-strong crowd of the Cape Verdean diaspora at the airport. Flags, scarves, songs. Because for a nation defined as much by the people who left it as the people who stayed, this World Cup wasn't just about football, it was about the whole world finally learning how to say their name. June 15th, 2026. Group H, Cape Verde's first ever World Cup match against the reigning European champions, Spain. Nobody gave them a chance. Spain had stars on the bench who'd start for almost any other team in the tournament. Even without Lamine Yamal, who started the match injured, this was supposed to be a formality. 39 minutes in, it almost ends. Spain works the ball down the left, finds a gap, and suddenly, Ferran Torres has a clean shot with only Vozinha standing in the way. He dives. The ball cannons off the crossbar. Chaos. The ball pops loose in the box. Mikel Oyarzabal throws himself at the rebound. Header inbound. Vozinha gets up, leaps again, pushes it away. Offside flag saves Spain the embarrassment of a disallowed near miss, but the message was already sent. This man was not going down quietly. Save after save. A diving fingertip deflection off a corner kick that, for one frame, makes him look 20 years younger, before the camera zooms in and the lines on his 40-year-old face tell the real story. By full time, 7 official saves, a clean sheet, a 0-0 draw against the second-best team on the planet. He was named Player of the Match, and the records started falling. At 40 years and 12 days old, Vozinha became the oldest player ever to appear in a nation's first-ever World Cup match, breaking a record set just one day earlier by Curaçao's Eloy Room. He became the 3rd oldest goalkeeper in World Cup history to keep a clean sheet, the 9th oldest player to ever appear in the tournament, period. Outside the stadium, Cape Verdean fans gathered and sang, flags waving, scarves held up to the cameras. The world didn't know the name Cabo Verde before that night. It did after. Vozinha woke up the next morning a completely different kind of public figure. Almost overnight, he gained 14 million new followers, a journeyman goalkeeper from a country most people couldn't find on a map, suddenly one of the most searched names in football. But the story that followed was even more human. His mother wasn't there to see his World Cup debut. A $15,000 visa bond had kept her from making it into the country in time. Word got out, and officials stepped in. Days later, she was granted her visa and made it to the United States. Through all of it, the records, the followers, the global attention, Vozinha himself stayed remarkably grounded. Asked directly about the sudden fame, he brushed past it. He was happy about his mother, sure, but as for the rest, in his own words, he's there for one reason: football. Now there was just one question left. Would she make it in time to actually watch him play? June 21st, Miami Stadium, Cape Verde against Uruguay, 2-time World Cup champions. She made it. Vozinha's mother was in the stands. This time, she got to watch. What she saw was the most chaotic, dramatic 90 minutes of Cape Verde's entire World Cup story so far. 21 minutes in, Cape Verde shocks everyone again. Kevin Pina steps up to a free kick from 32 metres out and somehow threads it through a gap in Uruguay's wall and into the bottom corner. Cape Verde's first ever World Cup goal, a 1-0 lead against a 2-time champion. But this wasn't going to be another quiet defensive masterclass. This was end-to-end. Just before half-time, Uruguay levels through Maxi Araujo, and then, 6 minutes into stoppage time, Agustin Canobio fires them into the lead. 2-1, Uruguay, at the break. Here's the human part. Vozinha wasn't flawless this time. He was stranded on the first goal, beaten again on the second. For a moment, it looked like the fairy tale was about to take a very normal, very mortal turn. Then, just after the hour mark, substitute Helio Varela punishes a poor pass, catches Uruguay's goalkeeper miles off his line, and rolls the ball into an empty net. 2-2. He'd score it just over 2 minutes after coming on, the fastest goal by an African substitute at a World Cup since Roger Milla, back in 1994. Late on, Uruguay thought they'd snatched it. Araujo tapped home what looked like a winner. Vozinha had actually been beaten again, but the flag went up. Offside. Vozinha's blushes, spared by inches. Final score, 2-2. 2 draws, 2 points, 0 defeats through 2 matches against a European champion and a 2-time world champion. And there was one more record buried in the chaos. Uruguay's own goalkeeper, Fernando Muslera, is also 40 years old. For the first time in World Cup history, 2 40-year-old goalkeepers started the same match. Vozinha wasn't the untouchable hero this time. He was something better, human. He got beaten, he got lucky, and his team found a way anyway. And his mother was there, in the stands, to see all of it. The story isn't finished, and here's why it actually matters. Spain has already taken control of Group H, beating Saudi Arabia 4-0. That leaves 3 teams fighting for the one remaining spot in the round of 32: Cape Verde, Uruguay, and Saudi Arabia. Cape Verde's path is refreshingly simple. On June 27th, against Saudi Arabia, win, and they're through to the knockout stage, their first ever World Cup, and they'd already be playing in the round of 32. A draw would still leave them very much alive, depending on how Uruguay's final match against Spain goes. Only a loss would put their World Cup in real jeopardy. Think about that for a second. A nation of 500,000 people, the smallest in tournament history by land area, 90 minutes away from the knockout rounds of a World Cup, in their first ever appearance. Whatever happens next, here's what's already true. A 40-year-old goalkeeper who spent 19 years in football's quiet corners, Angola, Moldova, Cyprus, Slovakia, stepped onto the biggest stage in the sport, got knocked down, got back up, and kept his country in the fight. He didn't get here by being the most talented. He got here by never leaving. Sometimes the most remarkable thing a person can do is simply not give up for long enough that the world finally has to notice. This is Vozinha's World Cup.